All right. So I recently had the opportunity to rent a probe lens by LAOWA. Now, I actually don't have it because I actually had to send it back, but I should mention a few things. We rented it with our own money. We didn't get asked to make this video. We didn't get any money to make this video. So, from that perspective, I feel like I should at least share that up front. But I did want to kind of give a quick, unbiased review of it because it's actually a really interesting product and I've been interested in it for a while. I actually think it was released almost 2 years ago now. I think it was released sometime in 2022 or 2023. I do have a few notes that I kind of wanted to talk about it because it was a lens that I had been interested in for a while. So the full name of it actually is the LAOWA 24mm T8 2X P. It's Pro 2BE, like probe. So it's a 24mm probe lens that is T8 aperture, and it has a 2x reproduction ratio. So I spent about a week with it and I took a bunch of shots, and we'll try to piece those shots in throughout the video. Hopefully those will kind of help give you an idea of what you can use this lens for, but there's definitely a few things that I need to talk about. First off, I want to talk about things that you should know before even purchasing this lens or renting this lens. I have a full little thing of notes here, and I'll try to read off some of these. This should help give you kind of a good overview of everything about the lens. So first off, it's a full frame lens, which means it covers, anything smaller than that. So if you wanted to use it with a Super 35 or a full frame sensor, both of those would work. Super 35 would crop in a little bit on the lens, but it's definitely capable of doing that. I personally used it with the FX3, but I'm sure you could use it with any Sony camera. There's also a wide range of lens mounts for it. So I think it initially comes in PL lens mounts, but you can definitely get it in something like E mount, RF mount. I think there's even an L mount version, but none of them have any electronic connection. So if you're expecting to get lens data from it, you will not. I already mentioned that it's a 24mm and that it's a T8. Now the T8 is significantly better. There was a previous version. Now I've been told, and in my research, I found that this lens is specifically designed for the commercial industry. I think it has some designs that are specific for cinema use, which means it has the pitch thread on it, which allows you to kind of set up motors to rotate the aperture or the focus on it, which is interesting, but I actually did not use any of those, so I won't comment anymore other than to say that it does have those. There was a previous version of this lens. It's actually a T16 or an F16. They're really close, but it had lights on the end of it. This one does not have any lights on the end of it. However, a T8 is way more easily usable during daylight, but as it does get darker, it is a significant struggle. I did use it with the FX3, which has phenomenal low light capabilities, and it has that second base ISO that you can use at 12,800, which is pretty much how I shot. Almost every shot was at 12,800 because I was doing everything outside and did not have any additional lighting. You definitely need a lot of light for this lens to work. So there's a very shallow depth of field on this lens. I should definitely note that when you are using this lens, a very small plane is in focus, and that's partially because of the design of the lens, and it's also partially because the close focusing ability of the lens. A few other things that I should note here: it is manual focus only. I think I mentioned that up front, but if you're thinking about buying this for your Sony and being able to focus the Sony macro, it's definitely not capable of doing that. The distortion is really well controlled on this lens. I should probably mention that one as well. I should mention, with the lack of electronic connection, that means that there is no profile corrections or in-camera corrections for this lens, which means whatever you get out of the lens is exactly what your camera is going to see. So if you are planning on doing profile corrections later, you will have to do that in post. DaVinci Resolve is absolutely capable of doing that, but I felt like I should mention that. There is a minor amount of distortion and there is a minor amount of vignette, especially at the T8 end, but as you start to move further away from that T8 stop and you start moving into T16, all of that vignetting goes away, so it's definitely not a problem at all. It is really hard to get the 2x reproduction ratio. You have to be very close in order to get that. You have to be almost right up to the front element on that lens. So I would probably more expect this lens to be, if you're focusing on things, I would more expect it to be like a 1.5 times lens for most use cases, even a 1-to-1 perfect macro reproduction. But anything, further than that has to be very close to the lens, and you start getting that very shallow depth of field. It does go up to T40, which is a very, very narrow aperture, which lets very, very little light in, and you will definitely need extra light in order to do that. Yeah, a few things that I've definitely learned with this is it's very hard to use handheld. It's almost not possible to use handheld whatsoever. You are going to need some sort of either tripod or motion control array. There is definitely a few things that you can use to kind of help like shift the lens or slowly move the lens. If you're looking for those commercial shots, you're probably going to need a slider so that you can kind of like slide from the left to the right, the lens, and get it going through things or getting it going closer to things. But if you're in nature, it's actually like, trying to shoot wildlife or small things, it's actually very hard to set those things up to get those, very smooth shots. So tripods work much better for that. But you have to remember you're going to be kind of adjusting the tripod almost constantly, and it's going to be almost guaranteed a static shot. So if you are thinking about purchasing this lens, especially for shooting wildlife, just know you probably should buy a very quality tripod or a very expensive motion control system up front in order to utilize this lens to its full potential. Oh, the other thing that I should mention is this lens actually does come in 2 other formats. So there's a total of 3 formats for this lens. I think there's like an angled probe, there's a straight on probe, and then I think that there is like a periscope version of it. So there is 3 different types that you can get. I stuck with the straight on one just because I wanted to get like the very easy, simple, version of it that would not be overly complex. I do kind of wish I would have got the periscope. I think the periscope would have been fun, especially for some of the more like water shots that I did. Like trying to get underneath the water would have been more interesting to do with the periscope. But each one of those attachments, I think, is an additional $1,000. So the base lens on itself is like $2,000, $2,500. I don't know the exact number. That's part of the reason I didn't buy one. That's part of the reason I rented one, is because of the price. But they do come with interchangeable lens mounts and interchangeable barrels. So you can buy an entire kit and basically have everything that you could possibly need for any shoot with that lens or that style of shooting. The other thing I guess I could mention with this is if you are thinking about buying this so that you can travel with it or you can go places with it, it is quite long. I think it's over like 24 inches long. So it's quite a big lens when you try to stuff it in a bag. It was bigger than my 200 to 600 that I have from Sony. So if you are planning on traveling with it, definitely realize that it's going to take up a good amount of space in your bag. When I did rent it, they gave me a large Pelican case with it, which was absolutely phenomenal because I ended up just carrying that Pelican case and just throwing it in the back of my truck. But if you are planning on kind of bringing it on an airplane, just know it's probably going to need its own bag, or you're going to have to bring an additional Pelican case that's long enough to carry all of the lenses that you're planning on bringing. So let me talk about some of the valid use cases for this. So I can really only comment on one of these, but I have heard a few of the other use cases. So the first and probably most common use case for this is going to be like up close macro reproduction of wildlife for like small bugs or flowers or even like bees and stuff like that. Wildlife is a great use case for this lens. Especially if you're trying to shoot during the daytime or early evening or, like late mornings, because early mornings would be kind of hard with the lack of light, but you do have to be kind of cognizant of the amount of light that is coming into this lens almost constantly. Shooting at a T8 is really difficult, which does make it a lot more difficult for shooting wildlife because it's really hard to have additional lights or supplemental light when you are shooting wildlife, but it does work. And it is actually also waterproof, so that makes it great for some of like using it in ponds or using it in small like bodies of water. Even if you're going to just go into the water for a little bit, or it's raining or it's wet, like it's a perfect use case for that lens if you want to do some macro shots. Now, I do have a regular macro lens, and to be honest, I used the 90mm Sony macro for way more things. This is definitely a very niche lens. So wildlife is the first use case. The other use case that I could see for this is definitely commercial shoots. There's definitely times when you want to get like up close product shots and stuff like that, or you want to get really tight shots of like what's going on in like the world of baking. You know, if you want to get like a really tight shot of, you know, the pot that's on the stove and it's cooking, you know, noodles and stuff, it will be, you know, a perfect lens to use for that. Also, if you want to get like a really like low angle view, it does focus to infinity, so you know you can still get like that wide 24 millimeter look. It's definitely not as good quality as like a regular 24, but I could see a lot of use cases for this in the commercial world, especially when you want to get some of those more unique shots that, you know, not everybody can get. And that actually leads me to my third and probably most odd use case is anytime you want a really unique shot. This lens is probably one of the most unique lenses out there when it comes to getting the like low angle, that Bug's Life kind of feel, or when you're like really close to the ground, it gets those really unique shots. You know, so if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, you've already have other, like every other lens in your, you know, storeroom. I mean, this would be a perfect opportunity for you to kind of, you know, pick something up that not everybody will have, and it will kind of give you that edge when you're looking for like really unique shots. So I think that the use cases for this are very limited, and I think that really brings me to the final question of this video is, should you buy it? I think it was $2,500, so we're just going to assume that it's $2,500. You know, for $2,500, that's quite an expensive lens. I think that there's a bunch of other options out there that you could go with that could, you know, give you something similar. I think if you don't have a regular macro lens, this would not be the first lens that I would pick up to do macro with. I would go out and buy a macro photography lens, something that's like a 1:1 times reproduction, either like a 50 millimeter or a 90 millimeter macro. Those produce, you know, way more close-up images. They produce, you know, significantly better results. You can also use the 90 millimeter macro for portraits. It's one of the sharpest lenses that I've ever seen. I actually own one, and it's phenomenal for portraits. It's phenomenal for, you know, those up close shots. The 90 millimeter means that the lens doesn't have to be that close to things in order to get, you know, that really high reproduction ratio. It's the same thing with the 50 millimeter, you know, so there's other cheaper options out there that are significantly more affordable. Some of these options are like half price or quarter of the price of this probe lens. So if you're looking for a macro lens, this would definitely not be the first thing that I would buy, especially seeing that it's a manually controlled lens for almost everything, which makes life very difficult if you're just a solo creator. It's much better, you know, it has a much better use case if you're utilizing it with the team, or you've got motors and you have a first AC that's helping you pull focus. You know, it's not impossible to use as a solo creator or a solo filmmaker, but it is definitely more difficult. And so like that's why it kind of leads me to, you know, for most people this would be a don't buy, but it would be a rent. I think there's a number of places out there that you can rent this from. I personally rented mine from Lens Rentals. So you can definitely do that as well. I'm not affiliated with them. I don't have any sort of, you know, kickback, or I don't get any money for recommending them. I'm just kind of sharing that experience that I did rent from Lens Rentals, and that has helped when it comes to, you know, finding rare lenses or lenses that I would not be able to afford to purchase and to try them out. I think I'm going to start doing that more in the future. Instead of buying lenses, I think I'll try renting them first. That's actually how I originally got into the 16-35. I had always, you know, kind of used the 24-70, but I rented the 16-35 and ended up buying it. So that's definitely the path that I would recommend taking if you're interested in getting a lens like this. You know, rent it first, see if it works, especially if you have like a commercial or photo shoot that you're thinking of, or you're going on a wildlife trip that you think you're going to have like a lot of like really close focus opportunities. You know, maybe rent a probe lens, see if it really works for you. And if it's something you use a lot, then it might be a good opportunity to buy. All right, so that is it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed all the B-roll that I shot with it. I didn't get that much B-roll, but I think I got enough to kind of give everybody an idea of the quality of the lens and what you can kind of get out of it. As always, we do have some future travel coming up. We have more videos planned in the future. We would love to have you subscribe to the channel if you made it this far. That would be, you know, really appreciative if you could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video if you like this type of content. It helps us understand, you know, what people want more content of. We do have some travel coming up. We do have some food stuff coming up. So we're not just doing tech reviews, but we do travel, tech, and food. So if you're interested in either one of those things, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. And that is it for this video, and we will see you on the next one.